Think back to the very beginning. It wasn't like this, was it? In the early days, the ground felt solid. There was a sense of balance, a rhythm of give and take that felt normal. But if you look at where you're standing today, the landscape is unrecognizable. The problem is, they didn't tear down the old version of you in one day. They didn't flip a switch and turn into someone else overnight. If they had, you would have seen the danger and run. Instead, they did it inch by inch. Anyway, it's a brilliant, albeit cruel, strategy. It's the art of the microscopic shift. It started with things so small they felt petty to even mention. A little less interest in your day here, a slightly longer silence after you shared a win there. To be fair, you probably told yourself you were being too sensitive. You made room for their bad mood, then their stress, then their personality. But see, every time you made room for a small disrespect, they took it as an invitation to move the wall just 1 inch further into your territory. I mean, if you think about it, you've been living in a state of constant, subtle adaptation. You've become like a plant growing around an obstruction. You're still reaching for the light, but your shape has become distorted just to survive the environment. Interestingly, because it happened so slowly, your brain normalized the dysfunction. You didn't notice the temperature rising until you were already simmering in a reality that would have horrified the old you. Here's the thing. They needed you to stay comfortable while they dismantled your confidence. They needed the transition to be so smooth that by the time you realized something was wrong, you'd already lost your baseline for what right actually looks like. Let's just say, they didn't change the world around you, they changed the way you experience yourself within it, one tiny, unnoticed concession at a time. Have you ever looked at an old photo of yourself from just a few years ago and felt a strange pang of grief? Not because of how you looked, but because of the expression in your eyes, the lightness, the lack of hesitation. That version of you didn't have to scan a room for exits or check the weather of someone else's mood before deciding if it was okay to speak. To be fair, you didn't lose that person in a single argument. You lost them in 1,000 tiny, unremarkable moments where you chose to be understanding instead of being honest. Anyway, consider the way they've slowly re-engineered your daily life. It started with a preference. They didn't like that one friend, or they felt neglected when you spent too much time on your hobbies. It wasn't a command, it was just a subtle pressure, a sigh, or a cold shoulder that made it easier to just stop doing the things that made you you. Interestingly, because it happened over months or years, you didn't see the cage being built around you. You just thought you were growing, or maturing, or learning how to compromise. But see, if you think about it, a compromise requires two people to move. In this game, you're the only one doing the walking. I mean, let's just say, they've turned your life into a series of micro-adjustments. You've adjusted your tone, your schedule, your friends, and eventually, your very thoughts. You've started to pre-screen your own ideas through their lens before they even leave your mouth. Will this upset them? Is this worth the fallout? Once you start asking those questions automatically, the transition is complete. They don't even have to control you anymore because you've learned how to control yourself for them. The thing is, this slow-motion shift is designed to make you doubt your own memory. When you finally do try to point out how much things have changed, they look at you with total confusion, or worse, with pity. They tell you that you're remembering it wrong, or that it's always been this way. Because there was no single, massive explosion to point to, you find yourself struggling to justify your own exhaustion. You feel like you're complaining about inches when, in reality, those inches have added up to miles of distance between who you are and who you used to be. Believe it or not, they count on your desire to be a good partner to keep this machine running. They know that as long as the changes are small enough, your empathy will bridge the gap. You'll keep filling in the holes they dig, thinking that eventually, the ground will be level again. But the truth is, they aren't trying to build a foundation with you, they're just seeing how much of your territory they can occupy before you notice there's nothing left for you to stand on. It's a strange thing, isn't it? The way the human mind can adapt to almost anything if the change is slow enough. You've likely reached a point where things that would have been deal breakers 3 years ago are now just part of the routine. You've traded your standards for survival strategies. Anyway, the most effective part of this gradual shift is that it robs you of a clear starting point for your anger. When you try to explain why you're unhappy, it sounds like a list of minor grievances, but in reality, it's the cumulative weight of 1,000 tiny betrayals. The thing is, they've managed to turn your environment into a place where you are constantly off balance. By changing the landscape inch by inch, they've ensured that you never quite feel steady enough to stand your ground. You're so busy adjusting to the latest, minor, change that you don't have the energy to look at the big picture. I mean, if you think about it, you're essentially living in a house where the floors are being slanted 1 degree at a time. Eventually, you're walking at a 45-degree angle just to stay upright, and they're looking at you like you're the one who's crooked. Let's just say, they didn't just change the rules, they changed your tolerance for being mistreated. They've conditioned you to accept a lack of reciprocity as the baseline. Interestingly, you might even feel guilty for wanting more, as if your desire for the old version of the relationship is a sign of your own failure to grow. But see, that's the trick. They've made you believe that losing yourself is just part of the process. Listen. Have you noticed how you've started to treat your own feelings like they're an inconvenience? This is the stage where the slow inching moves from your external world into your internal identity. Because they changed the environment so gradually, you didn't just change your behavior, you changed your self-perception. You've gone from someone who knew their value to someone who constantly audits their own worth based on the feedback of a person who is never satisfied. To be fair, you aren't doing this because you're weak. You're doing it because you've been systematically conditioned to believe that your peace depends on their approval. Anyway, think about the mental energy it takes to maintain this version of yourself. You are living in a state of hypervigilance, constantly scanning for the next small shift so you can adapt before it hurts. But interestingly, no matter how fast you adapt, they stay one step ahead. If you think about it, this is a race you can't win because they are the ones drawing the map. Let's just say, they aren't looking for a partner who is enough, they are looking for a partner who is infinitely moldable. They want a version of you that has no edges, no resistance, and no memory of the original agreement. I mean, look at how your boundaries have turned into suggestions. In the beginning, you had lines you said you'd never cross. But then an inch was taken. Then another. Now, those lines are so far behind you that you can't even see them anymore. Believe it or not, this is exactly where they want you. When you have no firm ground to stand on, you become entirely dependent on them to tell you what's right or wrong. You've traded your internal compass for their shifting whims. The most exhausting part is that you're still trying to use logic to solve an emotional shell game. You think if you can just explain clearly enough how much you've given up, they'll have an aha moment and give those inches back. But see, they didn't take those inches by accident. It was a strategy. They don't want to hear about your loss because your loss is their gain. In their mind, every piece of you that disappears is more space for them to occupy. On top of that, you're likely feeling a sense of shame. You're ashamed that you let it get this far, or that you didn't catch it sooner. But how could you? You were fighting a war of attrition where the enemy was disguised as a friend. You were looking for a big battle, while they were busy winning through 1,000 tiny, quiet surrenders. Still, you're here, and that means there's still a part of you that remembers what it's like to stand up straight. The thing about a slow-motion shift is that once you finally see the inches that were taken, you can't unsee them. The fog doesn't just lift, it evaporates under the heat of your own awareness. You've been living in a version of reality that was carefully curated to keep you small, but that reality only exists as long as you agree to live in it. Anyway, the moment you stop adjusting your posture to fit their slanted floors is the moment the entire power dynamic begins to crumble. To be fair, someone who has spent months or years inching into your space will not give it back willingly. They will likely double down. When you start reclaiming those inches, when you start saying no to things you used to swallow in silence, they will act like you are the one changing the rules. They will try to make you feel like your sudden rigidity is the problem. But if you think about it, you aren't being rigid, you're just becoming solid again. You're remembering that you have a right to exist in a shape that wasn't dictated by someone else's insecurities. Believe it or not, the old you isn't gone, they've just been waiting for you to stop apologizing for taking up space. Let's just say, you don't need the permission of someone you deeply trusted to move back to the center of your own life. You don't need them to admit they took those inches in order for you to take them back. Look, it's time to stop measuring your worth by how well you can disappear. It's time to start standing tall, regardless of who it makes uncomfortable.